hope you've all had a good summer and that you've all stayed safe. It's a long time since we've done one of these, but we thought we'd give it another go as it's National Album Day, and the theme this year is the 1980s. So I thought, well, I'd do what I think is one of the quintessential 1980s albums. It was recorded slap bang in the middle of the decade, and it's Peter Gabriel's. So excuse the pun. A little bit of background on Peter Gabriel. As you most probably know, he was the leader of Genesis in the early to mid 70s, and then in 1975 he left Genesis. I won't go too deeply into the wheres and why-fors of why he did that, but one of the reasons was he wanted to spend more time with his family, which he did. He left in March 1975, and nothing was heard of him again until 1977, when he released his first solo LP called Peter Gabriel. And then from 1977 to 1980 he released a total of 3 LPs, all called Peter Gabriel, all with the same kind of typeface to give it a more corporate look. And then when he released his third album, which is Peter Gabriel 3, or Melt as it's sometimes known because of the cover image, he accidentally, along with the engineer Hugh Padgham, invented the gated reverb drum sound, which is a very 1980s innovation which you hear on a lot of hit records at the time. Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight, it's Phil Collins who was drumming on Peter Gabriel 3, which is when they accidentally found out this gated reverb effect. I've looked into technical details of how they do it, and I can't, it's beyond my knowledge of how they do it, but it was basically a happy accident. So he was a bit of an innovator. On that third album he started using the Fairlight CMI computer, one of only a few in the country, and they cost quite a bit of money. And then in 1982 he released his fourth solo album, again very similar typeface and obscured or distorted cover art. And in that time he was having hits. 77 he had a hit with Salisbury Hill, 1980 he had a hit with Games Without Frontiers, 82 he had his first American hit with Shock the Monkey. So he was obviously the ex-lead singer of Genesis. He was known as an innovator, as a solo artist. And then in 1985 he decided to start recording So. He chose for the producer of So a guy called Daniel Lanois, who he'd worked with on the soundtrack to the film Birdie, and Daniel Lanois later went on to great acclaim as being the producer of U2's Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby. And they recorded So at Peter Gabriel's home studio at his house in Bath in a converted cowshed. And on previous albums from Peter Gabriel 3 onwards, he decided he wasn't going to use cymbals or hi-hats or anything of that nature because he didn't like metallic percussion, which, as he started out as a drummer, is quite odd, but he thought they were too noisy and got in the way. But Daniel Lanois persuaded him to go back towards cymbals and hi-hats for So they brought in Stuart Copeland to do some hi-hat work, and his usual crew of David Rhodes on guitar, Tony Levin on bass, and there's a range of drummers used, including Stuart Copeland, Jerry Marotta, who was also in his band at the time, and a French drummer called Manu Katché. So that's the groundwork of So. So we'll again, excuse the pun, we'll go on to side 1. Okay, beginning side 1. We open with the track Red Rain, and going back to what I said earlier about the cymbals and the hi-hats, the very first sound you hear on the album is the sound of tapping hi-hats. I would say that Red Rain is possibly one of only 2 straight ahead rock songs on the album. It's a song about environmental damage, which was very much concerned in the 1980s, as it still is today, of course. Moving on from Red Rain, we go into Sledgehammer, which I'm sure that you're all familiar with. It's a song that very nearly didn't make it onto the album, as the album sessions were finishing up, and bear in mind the album took from February to December 1985 to record, such as perfectionist that Peter Gabriel is. The rhythm section of Tony Levin and Manu Katcher were packing up, ready to go home. The taxi was literally on the way to the studio to pick up Manu Katcher to take him to the airport. And as an afterthought, Gabriel said to Levin and Katcher, "Would you like to listen to this demo I've got?" which was Sledgehammer. And he said, "I think I'll put it on the next album, after this one that we're recording now." Well, they both listened to it, said, "No, this sounds great, you've got to put it on this album." Apparently Manu Katcher recorded his drum parts literally in minutes, because obviously he's packed up and ready to go home. And as Gabriel's a big soul fan, he decided to make it a bit of a homage to soul records of the 60s. So they went over to New York to record Otis Redding's horn section, the Memphis Horns. They're all over it, quite prominently. And another 80s kind of tie-in for the whole thing is Tony Levin plays a fretless bass, which is gives it a very 80s as well as 60s sound. So they get Sledgehammer, and this decide to release as a single. A video is made, which was made by Aardman Animations, who are famous for Wallace and Gromit, as you probably know. It took over 2 weeks for Gabriel to film his parts, because it was most of it, or the vast majority of it, is stop animation. The video was possibly one of the best pop videos ever made. It turned Sledgehammer into a massive hit, but it's a fantastic record anyway, so no doubt in my mind it would have been a big hit regardless of the video. But very nearly didn't make it onto the album, and that was the song that propelled the album possibly to where it got. So that's Sledgehammer, and then the next track is Don't Give Up, which is almost the exact opposite. It's almost as though he said, "You've had your fun with Sledgehammer, now you can have a piece of this," which is it's very stripped back, very minimal instrumentation. I'd say just a synth, piano, bass guitar and a hi-hat. Again, Tony Levin really elevates this with his bass guitar work. And the song is based on, or the lyrics of the song are based on an exhibition that Gabriel saw of some Depression era photographs of families moving around in the deep south of the United States during the Great Depression, and he kind of wanted to tie that into what was happening in the UK at the time, with a lot of traditional industries dying out. And the song takes the form of, it's a duet between a husband and a wife. He's concerned about his job, he can't find any work, and she's the voice of tender reassurance. Originally Gabriel wanted Dolly Parton to do the duet with him, because tying it in with the deep south of the United States, he wanted that kind of voice on the track. But she turned the session down, so he just phoned up his old mate Kate Bush and they did it. And like the song's the exact opposite Sledgehammer, so is the video. Nothing flashy about it, it's just Gabriel and Kate Bush in an embrace, slowly moving around as their parts come around. Quite an effective video, and nonetheless impactful than Sledgehammer, I don't think. And then the fourth track is that voice again, standard, pretty much rock song, crash bang wallop, heavy on the drums, and I think that is the only co-write on the album which co-wrote with the guitarist in his band, David Rhodes. So that's side one. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, side two opens with In Your Eyes. Now, when he recorded his third album in 1980, Peter Gabriel introduced the world to the concept of world music. This track on there, Biko, features African chanting. The subject matter of the song is South Africa. On In Your Eyes, which opens side two, he gave the world, or he introduced the world to Youssou N'Dour, or introduced a wider audience to the work of Youssou N'Dour, I should say, who was a Senegalese singer-songwriter. The song is basically a straight-ahead love song, but Peter Gabriel wanted that song to close the album. Now, the track listing I'm referring to is the original track listing, which is the vinyl edition. Vinyl was the predominant format in 1986 when the album was released, and Gabriel really wanted that song to make an impact, which is why he wanted it to close the album. But sadly, because some would say limitations of vinyl, it would sound better at the beginning of the album because of the diameter of the record. So he put it on at the beginning. So that's In Your Eyes, featuring You So Endure. The second track on side 2 is Mercy Street, which again expands on the idea of world music. It's based on, or the rhythm is based on some street recordings he made in Rio de Janeiro, and the subject matter concerns the American poet and sexton. And I think I've been reacquainting myself with this album just recently, and that track has really grown on me over time. When I first heard the album I was 15 in '86, and I just wanted the big hits and the rocky songs, but I think Mercy Street is a fantastic piece of work. Third track on side 2 is Big Time, which is a funk number. Tony Levin again really comes to the fore here with his bass work. With this track he invented the concept of his so-called funk fingers, which is where he does tape drumsticks to his fingers and with it on his right hand, and plays the bass strings with these drumsticks. Again, the lyrical content is very much 1980s. It's about yuppiedom and the age of greed. That was released as a single as well. Again, had a fantastic video. If you get a chance to see it, please check it out. And the closing track on the album is We Do What We're Told, which is based on the Milgram thought control experiments. It's pretty much an instrumental track, but none the worse for that. I think it's a great way to close the album. That's how the vinyl and the original cassette versions finish. If you're listening to the album via streaming or download or CD, you'll find that In Your Eyes closes the album as it was always intended to do. And you'll also find on the versions other than vinyl a song called This Is the Picture, which is a collaboration he did with the American performance artist Laurie Anderson. I think the idea was they both co-wrote it, and they did their own versions. So that's so. At the time, as I've already mentioned, on his covers he was always obscured, but his manager said to him, we really need to get you out there. Let's just have a nice photograph, and you need to give the album a title. Well, Gabriel hated giving albums titles. He was conversant with the photograph idea, so the guy who took the photograph was called Trevor Key, who famously photographed the cover for Tubular Bells, and the artwork was done by Peter Gabriel, who's most known for his work with Factory Records. He called the album So, which you can only see on the back because he liked the shape of the word, and he wanted something that was quite short and snappy. So that's So. It was released on the 19th of May 1986, got to number 1 in the UK, and has sold over 7 million albums or copies worldwide. I just want to read a quote that he made in Uncut magazine this year actually, so please bear with me while I read it. He said, "With So, I was trying to make a great record. I wanted every song to fire on all cylinders." But he also went on to say, "But I was aware I was riding my pop star moment, and I didn't expect it to last very long." Well, I think it announced him as a major artist. I think he still would be considered a major artist. His work since has been sporadic, to say the least. His next album was called Us in 1992, so that's 6 years after So. And then it's a long wait until 2002 before what so far is his last proper studio album, which is called Up, again, Us, Up, so very short titles. But he's been doing soundtrack work, and he's also been involved in a project which was called Scratch My Back, where he covered other people's songs and then he invited them to cover his. Now in 2014 I was lucky enough to see the Back to Front tour where he basically played the whole of So with a lot of the members of the band who played on the record. So the Manu Katcher on drums, David Rhodes on guitar, and Tony Levin on bass, where we got to see his funk fingers. So that's So. I hope you enjoyed that. We are going to do some more of these in the run up to Christmas and possibly beyond. If you would like to do, if you've got a suggestion for one that you'd like to do, if you'd like us to do it or you want to do it yourself, then please do get in touch via the usual channels on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Facebook for Nottingham Sunday Vinyl Sessions. And please stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.